Hey, my name is Dave, and I want to tell you a little story about this bass that I have here. And I've had this bass since I was 15 years old in 1990. And what it is it's a 1966 Fender Precision. And when I got this bass, it was in a box. I know a lot of people would look at a bass like this and say, oh, you're a butcher, you put a different pickup in this vintage bass and you change the bridge and the electronics are different. You put that hip shot on there, and you refretted it, and you shouldn't have ever done those things to a vintage bass like this. I gotta tell you, when I bought this bass, it wasn't a vintage bass. It was a used bass, and it was a junky used bass. I'll tell you what had happened. My cousin had this friend, and his name was Eric, and Eric found this bass in the closet of my cousin's uncle. So try to follow that. So my cousin had this uncle who had this bass. It was in his closet, and my cousin's friend bought it off of him, and I think he paid $50 for it. And it was a Sunburst Fender Precision in perfect shape. It had the pickup covers and everything. I think it had the original strings on it, original flat wound strings. So my cousin's friend got this bass home, and he looked at it, and in 1989, a Sunburst bass was the most uncool color of bass you could have. So what he did was he got one of those little sander discs that you put in a drill, and he ground all the Sunburst paint off of it, and he got some fluorescent green paint, and he painted this whole bass fluorescent green. And he cut the pick guard off right here, so you just had the few controls. And then some things went wrong on it, and it was pretty much unplayable. So I was able to get this bass off of him. And what I did was I took the neck off of it, and I stripped all the green paint off the neck, and thankfully he didn't paint the front of the neck. So I still have the original finish. It's the only place on this bass that has the original finish. But I stripped everything off, and in fact you can see in this screw hole here, I don't know if you can see that, you see there's a little green paint there? That's what color this whole bass was. So I stripped the neck and refinished it with polyurethane, because that's what we had at that time, and that's what I knew to use. And in fact I've worn through that polyurethane in some places. And I took the body to Lay's Guitar Repair in Akron, and I picked one of the original colors of this bass. I wanted it a teal color because at that time that was a really popular car color. It was a color just like this. I think the Chevy Beretta had a color that was similar to this, and I thought that was pretty cool at that time. But I had the bass painted, I think it's called Ocean Aqua Blue was the original color. I had it painted with the correct white primer and everything. And we put the bass back together with a new white pick guard at that time, and I played it that way for 4 or 5 years. And then I started really getting into, the slap stuff in the mid-90s. So I wanted to get a more slap type sound. I was aiming to get a sound like Flea had on Mother's Milk. And I had this J-bass pickup put in, and I had a DiMarzio Model P put in for the P-bass pickup, and I played it like that, this bass just like that, for probably 20 years. I had a hip shot put on in the late 90s, which I still have, and it still works great. I had this Leo Quan bridge put on it, and then probably within the last year, I finally changed out the pick guard, and I put this tortoiseshell pick guard on, because when I first did this bass, a tortoiseshell pickguard, which I always wanted, they were like $50. And of course now you can go on eBay and get one for, $15. So when I changed the pickguard, I also went to a stack pot jazz volume control. For years I didn't have a tone control on this bass. I just on or off, just a volume knob and a 3-way switch out of a Les Paul, and then I have a series parallel switch for the P-bass pickup. So that's a little bit about this bass. I'll tell you something that's interesting is this strap. I don't know if you could tell, this strap was white at one time, and it is just really grungy. And I've had this strap on this bass since 1991. And what happens is I was playing this club in Akron called Ramones, and I was 16 years old. And when I left the club after my band set was done, because we couldn't stay in there, we were underage, in the parking lot in a mud puddle, I found this strap. And it was soaking wet, obviously. And I picked it up, and I really didn't have a good strap. So I took this thing home, and I tried to clean it the best I could. And it was wet, and I put it on the bass. And lo and behold, after about 3 or 4 days, when it dried out, I couldn't get it back off because the leather had shrunk. So if you ever want to put a strap on an instrument and you want it to never come off, and it's got leather ends, just soak it in water and put it on, and when it dries out, that leather's going to shrink. And here we go, 26 years later, the same strap is still on this bass. Maybe I should get a new one, but this one's kind of got sentimental value to me now. So what's also kind of cool, I think, is neat about this bass. So this is a road-worn bass, except it was road-worn by me. You know, it's got missing paint and wear marks, and you know, the neck's got wear marks on it, and every bit of that was done by me, which I think is also, it's my personal connection to this instrument. So, if you have any questions, let me know. The body of this bass, just as another side note, is a 1966 body. It's got the neck plate with the F logo, which lets you know right away it's a CBS bass. Serial number is 157402. But another thing that's kind of interesting is this neck is dated 1965. I think it's dated like September of 1965, and the body is dated June of 1966. I think June 6th. So I always thought that was kind of weird, 6666. Oh, we won't go into that, but anyways, so that's kind of interesting. This neck must have been in the parts bin for a lot of years. The neck is what they call a C neck, so it's got a 1 3/4 inch nut, which unfortunately, this is the bass that I learned to play on and I've played on for years, and I've gotten used to this big wide neck, and it's hard for me to adapt to basses with a narrow neck. So that's probably kind of ruined me for playing a lot of other basses. There aren't any other basses I know of right now that have a nut width that wide. So if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.